Hi, I'm Bill Bradley. Join me for a recent excerpt of American Voices. I'm Bill Bradley. We're back now on American Voices.
Today's Yupik word of the week, biluguk. Biluguk.
Nikki Corbett was frustrated when she couldn't find the Yupik books for her young son to teach him about his heritage. Yupik is a language spoken by Native Alaskans, and so Nikki created a Yupik coloring book to help children reconnect with their culture and preserve the language. Nikki Corbett is here with me now. Nikki, welcome to American Voices.
Welcome. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So can you tell us how, over the generations, what happened to you, your culture in Native Alaska, what it was like for you growing up, trying to stay connected to your heritage?
Yeah, I grew up in a small community, Bethel in Yupik. It's Mamtalishak, and we're located in the southwest region of Alaska. You can only get there by plane. And in my hometown and in the region where I live, we have 58 surrounding villages. Our main Alaska Native group in my region is Yupik, and on the coast we have Jupik, which is similar to Yupik, but they have a different dialect. And growing up, Yupik language was taught briefly in schools, but through colonization and outside contact, we had lost a part of who we are because of the assimilation. And that was my grandparents' generation. They lived solely off the land and they traveled by seasons. And it wasn't until they had children and their kids were forced to stay put in the, communities where they probably wouldn't have normally resided. And then, of course, we're sent off to schools speaking English and being punished for speaking our native language. And it wasn't only Yupiks, it was a lot of the other Alaska Native cultures that experienced this boarding schools as well, the boarding school eras. And there are many Alaska Native cultures that have lost a huge part of who they are because of this assimilation. And so growing up for me, the Yupik side of me was my mom, and she struggled with her own addiction issues. And so a lot of the Yupik that I learned was from my Yupik teachers and from my aunt, who used to kind of took me under her wing and brought me with her to spend summers at fish camp to put away fish.
Well, tell us about growing up and going to fish camp with your aunt. Can you tell us about it and what it was like for you and what you learned about your culture and yourself?
Yeah, so going to fish camp was probably one of my favorite things as a kid to do. We would get in our Lund and we'd go up the river about 10 minutes and we'd be at fish camp. And so it was run by a generator. It was living, I guess you could say, off grid, but that would be how all fish camps were. And so my uncle would go out fishing, and that's when the fish were plentiful. And it was mostly kings, and they were anywhere from 30 to 50 pounds, and some of them would be as tall as me.
How big?
They were big, so they were anywhere between like 30 to 50 pounds, and that was when they were plentiful. And there were so many. Obviously this was probably before the trawling industry was big, and the salmon were able to make it to their tributaries and spawn. We would just spend all summer basically at fish camp tending to the fish. My uncle would go out fishing and would come back. My aunt would just be there at the cutting table, cutting fish. And I was the fish washer and the gut dumper. So I would be just there with my wash. I guess it would be like a carpet scrubber, scrubbing the fish, because you want to make sure that there's no blood or guts on them, and so you're washing them real good. And I'd be helping my aunt, and my aunt would invite her friend over, and my grandma, and maybe my aunt, and they would all sit in the smokehouse and eat debuk, fish heads.
What else did she teach you?
My aunt taught me. She almost taught me how to cut my first fish, but because the fish were so big, I ruined it, and I wasn't able to. I was demoted back to fish de-sliming and fish washing just because salmon were so precious back then. But my aunt taught me, I used to watch her sew, and she would take me places, and she would bring me around to travel, and she just taught me so much and was a huge part of who, growing up and teaching me, just the ways of our Yupik ways of life.
So let's fast forward. When you found yourself looking for books, how did you get this idea for a coloring book, and how do you go about creating it?
I was pregnant with my daughter. I knew that I wanted to start collecting Yupik educational material because where I live, we don't have a Yupik charter school and we don't have a Yupik immersion program, and which is something that they do back home in Bethel. And so I knew that once I was pregnant, and I didn't know that it was a he or she, she was actually surprised. So I knew at that moment that I wanted to start collecting Yupik educational material, and there wasn't really any that you could purchase online. You could get it if your student was going to a charter school or the immersion program, but there wasn't anything really that you could go online and buy. And so that's sort of where the idea stemmed from. It's been 7 years in the making. And so it was something that I knew I wanted to do. It just took me a really long time to sort of bring it to light because I'm a mom and a business owner, and I'm going to school to be a nurse practitioner. So
Hmm.
it sort of was in the background.
It's a full life.
Yeah.
And you want to be an author too. Okay. So look, I understand you met an artist for the book at the Iditarod dog sled race. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. I actually played basketball against her sister, and I hadn't really known her very well, but met her sister playing basketball, and over the years we got closer. She's an artist as well, and so we just sort of clicked. And that's where this, idea started circulating together because she has, similar hopes and dreams for the Inupiaq language, and so we just kind of partnered and said, "Let's do it."
You any good at basketball?
I I I love to play. I was a forward. I'm not very tall. I'm 5'5.5". I like to say it, but I was probably the second tallest on my team. So I was usually forward or center, even though I wanted to be, point or a shooting guard. But
Mm-hmm.
we had fun. And growing up in a small town, you start playing basketball when you're about 5 or 6, and you start traveling in second or third grade, and you travel to the villages, and we sort of have that love in basketball starting at a really young age. And I still love it. I still, if I get the chance to play, I bust out my shoes, and I don't mind it. It's like riding a bike again.
You never forget how to shoot if you've shot enough, right?
Yep, exactly.
So you met the artist, and what does the coloring book look like, and what does it teach us?
So the coloring book is in the Yupik language. It's really difficult. It's a very complex language, and it's not like English. And so we don't have A through Z. We have a, ja, eh. We've got our sounds are different. Where we say A, we say ah. Instead of C, we say ja. But a lot of the images that are associated with the letters of our Yupik language, their culture, there are things like A is agurak. In Yupik we call it Eskimo ice cream. And, we say that, other people I say that. But other people call it, they say Inuit ice cream. And so, and then jawiak is a drum. And so it's a Yupik drum. And so the images are what we associate with fun things in the Yupik language that are, I guess, something you wouldn't ever see in a regular coloring book. You won't see fry bread in a coloring book. And in Yupik, we have a salak, fry bread. And so it is images that are culturally relevant, but also related to our culture. And they're fun and interactive.
So how do you say good day, how are you, and goodbye, and did my shot go in Yupik?
So we would say, Let's see. Goodbye is biuha if you're saying it to one person. Biuchdik if you're saying it to two people, and then biuchji if you're saying it to three or more. We would say paka is hello. Jangachit, how are you? I'd have to look up, did my shot go in? Because that would be is ball. And I don't know if I guess the word shot, we could apply it to shooting a basketball, but our translations in Yupik, they're very literal, and some of the words, we don't.
Yeah.
If you have an English word, we might not have it. Like we don't have happy holidays. We say alusis doch chikichi, which is like Merry Christmas to you.
Hmm.
But we don't have words like happy holidays or
Hmm.
those type of things.
And I understand you also have a sewing company and you create all kinds of items that connect to your heritage. Can you tell us about a few of your favorite items?
Yeah. So I started So Yupik in the summer of 2015, and it originally started with making pasbaks, which are traditional cloth pullovers made out of cotton material. And back in the day, Akadamani, they used to make them out of the flour sacks. They're have evolved into creating other materials, but my favorites are probably working with I love skin sewing, and I made a pair of biluguks, which are the traditional hard sole muklaks that replicated my grandmother's. And
Mm.
so I enjoy making the sort of traditional clothing that my grandmothers would make on the regular. And I'm hoping, to just keep continuing to learn and make them. But, skin sewing is my favorite because it forces you to just sit down and be put.
So that's really interesting. So there are a lot of these things that are great items, and you sell them out of your sewing company.
Yeah, I travel, I do shows and usually online sales, but all along with my business, I travel around the state and I teach others how to make their own books. And so
Hmm.
that's probably one of my favorite things to do is to travel the state and teach others how to make them. As you pick people, we're not stingy of our knowledge. And so being able to share that with, people all around the state, probably one of my favorite things to do.
So let's talk about where you live. Can you describe what's life like in Soldotna, Alaska? What's the pace there, the weather, the nature? What do you see? What do you hear?
Living in Soldotna, Alaska, it's very quiet in the winter times, very quiet, and it's peaceful. Where I live, I'm surrounded by birch and spruce and cottonwood trees, and it's just beautiful. We've got moose that wander through our yard. Usually we have to be very cautious with when my two young ones want to go out and play if there's moose around, especially if it's a mom and her two babies, which we have had recently. And having, moose around it's an interesting thing. We have had lynx around, and I haven't seen any in my backyard, but they are here. And, summertime is busy. Everybody comes down to go fishing on the Kenai or the Kasilof. And so they're coming here. Lots of tourists coming here to visit. It's very beautiful, and we go fishing for sockeye salmon on the Kenai in the summertime. And, it's just it's a quiet, peaceful life, and it's not surrounded by traffic or noise or big buildings. Hi, it's Nikki with So You Pick. It is -17 out right now. I'm going to show you what happens when you throw hot water outside when it's this cold. We're gonna throw it. You ready? You ready? Turns to dust.
Well, what I want to know is it true that you can see the northern lights from your backyard?
Yeah, we see northern lights showing is very it's a common thing in the winter that we see a lot. And usually they put on, I say they because in Yupik we believe of them as spirits, and so they put on a show for us, and so it's just so amazing to be able to just step out onto the back deck at night and to watch the northern lights dance. When I was a kid, my grandmother used to tell us not to whistle at the northern lights or they'll come down and take you, and take you away. And
Hmm.
so, there is sometimes that want to whistle at them and run away still now as an adult. And I can hear my grandmother telling me not to whistle at
Yeah.
them. But yeah, we see the northern lights. It's a normal thing that we see here in Alaska.
So when you visit cities coming from Soldotna, do you notice a difference, say, in the stress level or quality of life you have in Soldotna?
Yeah. When I travel to the cities, it's almost like I'm in another world just because it's so overly stimulating and it's so busy and everyone's in a hurry. And I traveled to Seattle this past spring and I had just watched moose in my front yard on Monday as they were just grazing in the grass. And then I went down to Seattle and there I was just sitting watching the world just pass by me. And it was so busy and everyone was in a rush. And I was comparing the two, just thinking how incredibly grateful I feel to be able to live in a space here where, life is so simple and calm. And then traveling, when I travel, I'm instantly can feel the energy around me, the constant movement of people. And so it does get overwhelming traveling. And there are,
Hmm.
it gets to a point where I am ready to come home to where it's quiet.
And you fish on the Kenai River in Alaska. It's famous for being a great place to fish. So what's it like to fish there and what kind of fish do you catch? Tell me about the beauty of the Kenai River. Can you describe it for us?
Yeah. So usually before I went fishing on the Kenai, I would go dip netting on the Kasilof River for I had become friends with others who had a boat. And so I would drive down to the Kasilof River and we would stand on the beach and we would fish with a big dip net for sockeye salmon. And that is an interesting, sort of type of fishing. It's not combat fishing. It's everyone is very friendly. Sometimes we just go down there just to see the zoo, but I had friends move down here and so we would go fishing on the Kenai River and we would go dip netting. And so you stand from a boat and you just kind of idle down the river and up and down the river and you stand with a big net in the water and you'll feel a fish hit the net and you immediately throw your net in the boat, dump the fish out,
Hmm.
stick your net back in the water and you bonk them on the head and you gill them and then you put them in the bucket. But we can't keep kings. There's been king salmon have not been able to be kept in possession because of the low numbers.
How about the beauty? Can you describe that for us?
It is a beautiful thing to be able to be out on the river. The water is so blue and usually if it's nice and sunny, it's a beautiful day. But there are so many boats out there. I mean, you can have anywhere from 50 to 100 boats, on the river, which can be chaotic, and
Wow.
there's not much beauty in that. It's everyone's kind of cheering each other on. And you'll see the seal, when there's tons of seals out there, it's a good day because the salmon are there. But there's a lot of beauty to it, but it's more fun, I would say, just because of how there's so much madness to it.
Well, Nikki, I want to thank you for being here and telling us about your Native Alaskan culture. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me on here, and I'm humbled to be asked to be here.
I've been speaking with Nikki Corbett. She created Yupik coloring books to help the next generation connect to their heritage. To find out more, visit us on Facebook. Facebook page is American Voices with Senator Bill Bradley. We're also now on Instagram. I hope you check us out there too. Our Instagram page is Bill Bradley on Sirius XM. Write me your thoughts on anything you've heard today and follow us.
Lose yourself in nature and find peace. Lose yourself in nature and find peace. Troubles will come, troubles will release. Lose yourself in nature and find peace. Lose yourself in nature and find peace. Lose yourself in nature and find peace. Troubles will come, troubles will release.
Thank you for listening to American Voices here on my YouTube channel. For more interviews celebrating the goodness and creativity of the American people, click the subscribe button below.